The mansion in General Santos City was silent that December afternoon, with only the distant sound of workers tending to the outdoor gardens. Manny Pacquiao walked slowly through the corridors of his home, observing the walls filled with golden belts, photographs with presidents, and trophies that told the story of an extraordinary career. At 45 years old, the former world champion felt an inexplicable emptiness, as if something important was missing amid all that conquered glory. On that day, his domestic assistant, Milagros Bantayan, had found a dusty cardboard box in the house's attic, hidden behind old training equipment. The middle-aged woman, who had worked for the family for more than a decade, descended the stairs carefully carrying the mysterious object. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the weight of the box, but from the sensation that it held something very special. Manny was in his office, reviewing documents related to his businesses, when Milagros knocked delicately on the door. She entered with cautious steps, holding the box as if it were a fragile treasure. The expression on her face was a mixture of curiosity and reverence, as if she sensed that this moment would be different from all others. The smell of old paper and damp wood spread through the environment. The champion lifted his eyes from the papers and fixed his gaze on the box that Milagros held. Something in his chest tightened instantly, a familiar sensation, but one he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if time had stopped and a forgotten part of his soul began to awaken. His hands, which had already knocked down giants in the ring, trembled imperceptibly as they extended to receive that simple cardboard object. Upon touching the rough surface of the box, Manny felt a wave of emotions invade his chest. There were no visible labels or identifications, just paper yellowed by time and some moisture stains that told silent stories. He gently dismissed Milagros and remained alone in his office, holding that box as if it contained the deepest secrets of his existence. His heart beat strongly, anticipating something his mind couldn't yet fully comprehend. Seated in his leather chair, Manny slowly turned the box in his hands, examining every detail of its worn surface. The cardboard was stained and softened in some parts, evidencing the years stored in precarious conditions. A faded label showed only fragments of handwritten letters, words he couldn't completely decipher, but which awakened distant echoes in his memory. The memories began to flow like a river breaking through a dam. He saw himself again as a 10-year-old boy in Kibawe, Bukidnon, running barefoot through dirt roads with patched clothes and a frequently empty stomach. The extreme poverty of his childhood returned with painful clarity. The nights sleeping on cement floors, the days when the only meal was a handful of rice divided among siblings, the constant feeling of insecurity about what tomorrow would bring. His mother, Dionisia de Pedran, appeared in his memories as a warrior figure, working tirelessly to keep the family together. He remembered how she would wake before dawn to sell fish at the local market, her rough and calloused hands counting every centavo with hope. Even in the most difficult moments, she always found a way to smile at her children, hiding pain and despair behind a silent strength that Manny would only understand years later. The boy he had been didn't fully understand his parents' sacrifice, but felt the weight of responsibility prematurely. At 12 years old, he was already selling cigarettes on the streets to help support the family, facing looks of disdain and cruel comments from people who saw him as just another street child. Each coin earned was a small triumph. Each complete meal was a victory celebrated in silence. Back then, dreams seemed like impossible luxuries. Boxing hadn't yet entered his life, and the future presented itself as an endless sequence of hardships to be faced. Even so, there was something in his spirit that refused to surrender. A small but persistent flame that made him believe that his circumstances wouldn't forever define who he would become. That same flame now pulsed in his chest as he contemplated the mysterious box. With trembling hands, Manny began to carefully open the box's lid, as if he were unearthing a precious archaeological artifact. The first object he saw was a piece of yellowed fabric, carefully folded and preserved despite the years. Upon unfolding it, he immediately recognized it. It was a fragment of the shirt his mother had made for him, with scraps of other fabrics. The only new piece of clothing he had owned for a long time during his childhood. Below the fabric, he found a small transparent plastic bag containing some old Filipino coins, rusty and without current monetary value. but which represented the first savings of his life. Each coin brought back the memory of hours selling homemade sweets made by his mother, or small jobs he managed to do for more prosperous neighbors. These coins were the symbol of his first dreams of buying shoes or a special meal for the family. At the bottom of the box, his fingers touched something that made his heart race. A handwritten letter on simple paper, with his mother's irregular but loving handwriting. The words were faded, but still legible. A promise written in Tagalog that one day they would escape poverty, that love would be stronger than hunger, and that every sacrifice would be worth it if they never lost faith in each other. The letter ended with a simple prayer, asking for protection for her special son. Along with the letter was a small black and white photograph, cracked at the edges, showing 8-year-old Manny next to his mother in front of the small wooden house where they lived. Both smiled at the camera borrowed from a neighbor, a smile that hid hunger but revealed genuine joy in being together. The image captured a moment of pure happiness amid adversity, a testament that true wealth already existed in their hearts. The last item in the box was a small wooden cross, hand-carved by his father, before abandoning the family. Despite the pain this memory brought, Manny understood that his mother had kept that object as a symbol of forgiveness and hope. Holding the cross between his fingers, he felt the weight of all the prayers his family had made, all the moments when faith was the only thing that kept them standing during the darkest storms of their lives. The first tears began to trickle down Manny's face without him feeling them coming. They flowed silently, carrying decades of repressed emotions that not even the most glorious moments of his career had managed to touch. Each object in the box was like a key that opened locked compartments of his soul, revealing the vulnerable boy who still existed behind the invincible champion the world knew. He held his mother's letter again, this time reading each word with deeper understanding. The promises she had written decades ago had come true in ways that not even she could have imagined. The son who sold sweets on the streets had become one of the most famous athletes in the world, but it was only in that moment that he truly understood the price his mother had paid to plant the seeds of that extraordinary future. The photograph trembled in his hands as he observed the smiling faces of mother and son. In that image, there were no championship belts, mansions, or material wealth, just pure love between two people who faced the world together. Manny realized that, at some point in his journey to success, he had forgotten the essence of that unconditional love that had sustained him during the most difficult years of his life. The tears now fell freely, each drop carrying memories of forgotten sacrifices, of hugs that warmed cold nights, of words of encouragement whispered when despair threatened to win. He remembered how his mother saved every centavo to buy bandages when he got hurt, how she daydreamed about a better future while washing other people's clothes to earn a few extra pesos. In that moment of complete vulnerability, Manny understood that all his world titles, all the fame and fortune he had accumulated, were merely external reflections of a much greater wealth that had always been present in his life. The true victory wasn't in international rings, but in his mother's ability to keep the family united and hopeful even when everything seemed lost. He had been a champion long before stepping into any professional arena. Still with the letter in his hands, Manny closed his eyes and allowed the deepest memories of his mother to return to the surface. Dionisia wasn't just a woman who had raised children in poverty. She was a survival strategist, a silent warrior who transformed impossibilities into daily opportunities. He remembered how she managed to perform miracles with minimal ingredients, creating meals that seemed like banquets in the eyes of hungry children. There was a special strength in the way his mother faced each new day, even when circumstances became more adverse. Manny remembered early mornings when he found her awake, sewing by candlelight, mending clothes she got as donations, or creating new pieces from scraps discarded by others. Her hands never stopped working, but she always had time to listen to her children's fears and dreams. The most touching memory that resurfaced was of a particularly difficult night, when there was nothing for dinner and the children cried from hunger. Dionisia had left the house and returned hours later with a small bag of rice, telling a story about having helped an elderly neighbor in exchange for the food. Only years later did Manny discover that his mother had pawned her only gold ring, a memento of her wedding, to get that meal. What most impressed the current world champion was his mother's ability to maintain dignity and hope, even in the most humiliating situations. When she needed to ask for help from more prosperous neighbors, she did so with her head held high, always offering some type of work in exchange for assistance. She never accepted pure charity. She always found a way to give back, even if it was through prayers or small favors. Dionisia had planted in Manny not only the determination to win, but also the humility to remember where he came from. She constantly repeated that, no matter how high he reached in life, he should always remember the people who helped him during the climb. Those words now echoed in his mind with renewed force, reminding him of responsibilities he might have neglected amid the whirlwind of his international career. Holding the small wooden cross, Manny reflected on the journey that had taken him from the boy of Kibawe to the internationally respected world champion. Success had come gradually, first with local victories, then national ones, until he finally found himself at the center of worldwide attention. Each achievement brought new responsibilities, new commitments, and, inevitably, less time for the simple things that really mattered. He remembered when he bought his first house for the family, the feeling of pride and accomplishment he felt seeing his mother finally living with comfort and dignity. But he also recalled how, as over the years, his visits became less frequent, always justified by professional commitments, intensive training, or international trips that couldn't be postponed. The tears returned when he thought about all the conversations he didn't have with his mother, all the Sunday lunches he missed because he was in gyms or business meetings. Success had created an invisible barrier between him and the people he truly loved. A barrier built not of malice, but of obligations that seemed more urgent than intimate moments of family connection. Manny realized that, at some point in his trajectory, he had begun to measure his worth by the number of titles won and the amount of money in his bank accounts, forgetting the fundamental values his mother had instilled in him. Fame had brought many good things, but it had also created a public version of himself that sometimes seemed more real than the simple man who existed beneath all the glory. The box in his hands represented a reconnection with his most authentic essence, with the boy who dreamed not only of championship belts, but of the possibility of making his mother smile without worrying about the next day. He understood that the greatest challenge of his life hadn't been defeating opponents in the ring, but staying true to the principles he had learned in childhood, even when the entire world applauded him for completely different reasons. Still alone in his office, Manny carefully reorganized all the items back into the box, this time touching each object with renewed reverence. The patched shirt, the rusty coins, the handwritten letter, the faded photograph, and the wooden cross. All these simple treasures now shone in his hands with more value than any golden trophy on his shelves. He walked to his office window, which offered a panoramic view of General Santos City. The city had grown over the years, just like his own life. But in the streets it was still possible to see children running barefoot, families struggling to survive, warrior mothers carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. These images instantly connected him with his own origins, reminding him that his story was just one among millions of others equally important. In that moment, Manny made a silent promise to himself and to his mother's memory. He would return to the roots of who he really was, not just as a public symbol of success, but as a man who understood the value of humility, gratitude, and social responsibility. He decided he would dedicate more time to personally knowing the stories of people who sought his help, instead of simply signing checks through intermediaries. The box would be kept in a special place in his house, not hidden in the attic, but on his bedside table, where he could see it every morning when waking up and every night before sleeping. It would serve as a constant reminder that, regardless of how many applause he received or how many newspaper headlines mentioned his name, he remained the son of Dionisia Dapidran, a woman who had faced poverty with dignity and love. Manny also decided he would begin documenting his family's stories, recording the lessons learned during the difficult years so that future generations could understand the true meaning of wealth and success. He wanted his children to understand that greatness wasn't only in winning fights, but in keeping a compassionate heart and feet firmly on the ground, no matter how high they flew in their own journeys. In the days following the discovery of the box, Manny cancelled several non-essential commitments and traveled back to Kibawe, carrying with him only the essentials and, of course, the precious box from his childhood. The car journey through familiar roads awakened even more memories, each kilometer reconnecting him with younger versions of himself who had traveled those same paths with uncertain dreams in their hearts. Upon arriving in his hometown, Manny didn't immediately head to tourist spots or famous places associated with his name. Instead, he walked through the dirt roads where he had played as a child, greeted street vendors who still remembered the skinny boy who sold sweets decades ago. Each conversation was a rediscovery. Each recognized smile was a re-established link with his most authentic origins. He visited the house where he had been born, now inhabited by another family, and asked permission to enter and show the box to the children who lived there. He told them, in simple Tagalog, the story of how apparently worthless objects had become his most precious treasures. He saw in those children's eyes the same spark of hope that had once been in his own eyes, the same silent determination to overcome difficult circumstances. At the local cemetery, Manny knelt before his mother's grave, carefully placing the box on the simple headstone. There, in a low voice, he thanked Dionisia for every sacrifice, every tear shed in silence, every prayer whispered during the darkest nights. He promised her that he would use his influence and resources to be a bridge between the world of success and the world of basic needs, never forgetting that both were equally real and important. When he returned to General Santos City, Manny was transformed. The box remained on his bedside table, but now he also carried its teachings in his heart in a renewed way. He began dedicating more time to local initiatives, personally talking with families in need, listening to stories that echoed his own experience. He discovered that his greatest victory wasn't in any international ring, but in the ability to use his journey to inspire others to believe that their dreams were also possible, no matter how humble their origins.
Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.